Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited to be talking to you. This month is February. It is Black History Month. It is also a month that we attribute to love if you're into sort of the commercial holidays. So Valentine's Day is up this month, and I thought for the month of love, I would do a Kiss of Death series, and it talks about, the whole premise behind the Kiss of Death series for Valentine's month is, behaviors that we experience in the name of love or in the name of intimacy, and what we thought would be love or we consider to be love in our relationship, but actually turns out to be pathological, unhealthy, or a detriment to our mental, emotional, and other forms of health, including mental, physical, and so on and so forth. So the idea behind that is that we would be talking about some of these things that happen in these relationships with people that are narcissistic, pathological, toxic, unhealthy, or people that are just not good for us in relationships, and perhaps these dynamics develop as a result of that. And today, one of the dynamics that I definitely want to spend time discussing is, the comment that we may hear sometimes when we're with a person that doesn't have a history of being in a healthy relationship, or their relationship with you is not healthy. When the person that you were with makes a comment, if I can't have you, then no one else can. When they make that comment when you're in a relationship with them, or some derivative of that, such as you belong to me, or you are never leaving me, or I will never let you go. Those would be derivatives of that comment. Okay, and so essentially, I've got some notes written down here because I wanted to make sure that I don't forget what I wanted to tell you guys about this. And whenever someone, for me as a therapist, or as someone who has, worked in corrections, forensics, and things like that for many, many years, whenever I hear someone make this kind of statement, or, one of my clients may tell me that someone has made this kind of statement to them, this is an immediate red flag for me, because what this statement signifies to me when I hear it, and the reason why it sort of sends these alarm bells, is a person doesn't view you as a partner. They don't necessarily view you as their mate, but what they do view you as an object, right? And that's an object that they are in possession of. So they view it as an object or something that they possess, or an extension of them. I'm going to try to simplify and break down what that actually means. For example, let's say that you have, when I was younger, we used to have toys. We used to have this like little playroom growing up, and every year we would my mom would get us together and be like, let's get together stuff that you guys don't play with anymore, recycle it, take it to Goodwill, or give it to, some children somewhere or something like that, right? So it would be that you kind of gather up like toys, old clothes and shoes, things that we don't have use for anymore, and sort of donate and like purge the house. And I'm certainly not saying that you're an old toy or anything like that, but I want you to kind of just stick with me here. So consider yourself to be someone's toy, and you may be in a relationship with someone and they may still interact with you, or they may not. The relationship might be one in which it's not good anymore. It's not healthy. It's not fun. You're ready to get out of it and move on your way. Well, instead of this person sort of releasing you from the relationship, like I say, bless and release, like, if you want to move on, bless them and release them, but if they don't want to release you from the relationship, they're like, the thought behind this comment is that, hey, even if I'm not interested in you anymore, I'm not treating you well anymore, I don't care, because I'm not ready to get rid of you. I'm not ready, and I never want to see you with another person, because that drives me intensely mad. It makes me intensely mad. It makes me incredibly jealous. And I don't like the thought of you being with someone else. I'm not one who's open to sharing you with anyone else. And so in simplified terms, that's kind of a way that I can sort of, break it down for you. They're not willing to share their toys. They don't want to see other kids playing with it. It's kind of one of those things that even if they leave it in they leave their toy in like a junk pile, they don't care, because they know where it is, and they want to have complete control over what happens to that. And they want to have complete control over you and what you decide to do with the rest of your life. And so that's why that comment draws significant red flags to me. That, and it also signifies that there's a certain level of pathology there. So that person can be incredibly jealous. They don't have good boundaries, meaning that they're not going to ever respect the word no, or, respect my personal space. And so no is not an option for them. They view you as being at their disposal to do with what they will. And so that's what that means to me. There could also be a lethality component, which is oftentimes where my mind goes. Just working in the fields that I've worked in for such a long time, it goes directly to lethality and mortality, because whenever people have made statements like this, when people have been involved in high conflict court cases, or child custody, or even just when there's been a breakup and there's typically domestic violence or other forms of violence that are involved in these relationships, when people usually make these statements, they're telling you that, I would even, I would kill you before I let you go, because that's how far I'm willing to take it, for you not to be able to move on. I don't want to see you happy. I don't want to see you with anyone else. I don't want to see you move on. So for me, there's like a lethality component to it. And that's another one of the alarm bells that goes off in my mind. There's certainly the pathology that's related to narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial, possibly even borderline as well. But there's certainly an instability, or a pattern of instability there. There could also be potential paranoia there. So this person may perceive you as wanting to pull away, or betraying their trust, or wanting to leave the relationship somehow. And so that triggers them to make these sort of statements. Again, it doesn't take away from the lethality component, but it certainly can cause them to spiral and become a lot more paranoid, a lot more possessive, and cause things to just sort of escalate between the two of you. So the potential for violence is very high, and I'm not just referring to physical violence. I'm referring to things like stalking. I'm referring to things like a person being incredibly possessive and sort of watching over you and not allowing you to, leave their home or leave their presence, or look at other people while you're with them. So, that could be emotional violence, verbal abuse, psychological maltreatment. Those things can certainly escalate. Digital or cyber violence as well, so sort of stalking social media, or monitoring you, or putting apps and things like that on your phone, or GPS trackers on your car and things like that, where they sort of monitor you and your movements and things like that. Those emotions such as jealousy and envious become very high and unpredictable as well. And, you know, that could sort of lead to these accusations and invasions of privacy and things like that. And so this is why this statement, if I can't have you, no one else can, is definitely a red flag. And here's some things that I want you to think about if you hear it, you know, and this is something that, you know, back in my day, you know, I remember like when I was going to school, you know, high school, college or whatever, and, you know, girls would talk about how girls would talk about how their boyfriends had made a statement to them similar to this effect. And, you know, the common thing was, oh, it's so cute that he's talking to me in this way and that he's like having such these extreme reactions and is showing that he's jealous. And it was viewed as being cute, or it was viewed as like, oh wow, this person really loves me and they're just so concerned and they don't want to lose me. And I'm here to tell you that, first of all, it's don't mistake what's happening or what's being said or what they're demonstrating for love or being cute, or, you know, them wanting to be closer to you in any way. If anything, I want you to try to have the opposite reaction and start creating some distance, you know, um, provided that there is monitoring for safety and things like that. And if you're able to, depending on what your situation is. I'm just speaking very candidly and I'm speaking very generally. So I don't know what everyone else's situation out there is, and everyone's situation is on a case by case, but these are just like general statements. What is applicable to you and your situation? Hopefully you can use that. If it doesn't, you could just sort of leave it on the floor until it does become applicable at maybe a later time or something like that. You know, the other recommendation that I make, in addition to you not mistaking this for love and not sort of, you know, finding this as charming or sexy or something like that, is drawing a boundary and setting limits with a person. And so when a person says something, hey, this isn't appropriate, that's not appropriate for you to talk to me in that way. What do you mean by that? You know, I don't like the way that you're speaking to me in that way. And I'm going to have to take some time and really think about what's being said or how you're acting towards me. And I just really need to take some space to process this. This is not okay. So communicating that this is not okay, drawing a very clear boundary and setting limits that you can't just talk to me any kind of way, because what you're doing is you are presenting what's called a veiled threat to me. That is a threat when someone makes a statement like that. And a threat, I cannot take threats lightly, and nor will I take a threat lightly. You know, so I'm gonna, you know, I have to really, you know, take some space from you and this relationship right now, because you are threatening me, and I don't do well with that, or that makes me very uncomfortable or makes me very fearful. And so I need to create some distance with that. You may actually want to reconsider the relationship. Again, this is a veiled threat, but veiled threats have a high potential to turn into actual threats or escalations of violence. So I would strongly urge you to perhaps get some counseling and start talking to someone who has experience in domestic violence and working with certain personalities to talk about some of the statements, because I guarantee you, if someone is making a statement like this, there's probably more than likely actions in the relationship that, you know, you may have dismissed, or again, you may have been thinking that perhaps this is a sign of their affection, or they're just insecure, or they really want to be close to me. But I'm quite sure if they're making statements like this, there are some actions and things in the relationships that are also red flags that solidify this person's potential for violence or instability in the relationship. And hopefully you've gotten information about their history in in their last relationships. Like, has this ever happened before where you've made a statement like this before? How did that relationship end? what sort of led to them making a statement like this in their last relationship, if they did. And you don't know necessarily if what they're telling you is the truth unless you knew them, maybe perhaps prior to you guys getting involved. But make sure you have enough data to make an informed decision about how you want to move ahead. Because if a person has a history of doing this before, they have a history of a violent past with other women, those are things that you want to consider before making any sort of decision. I would also recommend that you increase your social support, your emotional support. So, talking to other people around you, making sure that you are staying connected with your own friends, and even sharing people that you trust, sharing with them what this person has said and maybe some of the actions that are also very concerning to you. So definitely start talking about it more. And also, you can also recommend that that person, the partner that you're with who's made this statement, also try to increase their support. Again, it's another red flag if they don't have any friends, or if their friendships are very superficial, or they just don't have a good history of longevity in their friendships or stability in their friendships, or if they say, I don't want to have hobbies, I just want to be with you all the time. Again, that's a huge red flag. Another thing that I've mentioned here, and again, this depends on your comfort level and how close you are, is to also, be mindful if this person has access to or possesses any sort of weapons. People who have, again, if they're making statements like this, and that to me, it shows to me that, again, a veiled threat means that there's a propensity for violence there. And if a person is making a veiled threat and they have guns in the house, that means that they have the potential. There's a much greater potential to act on violent thoughts and things like that. There's a much greater potential that if this person is feeling impulsive and their emotions are taking over, and they may even perceive that you're leaving them, or just maybe be overwhelmed by emotions that they can't control. If there's a propensity for violence, if there's weapons in the home, or if they have access to weapons, that means that this situation is that much more serious and it should not be taken lightly. So checking for weapons and things like that. And lastly, the thing that I'll mention, and again, this list isn't comprehensive, and it's meant to be general. And I recognize that everyone's situation is different, but lastly, the thing that I'll mention is like a mental health check-in. So being mindful if your partner has any sort of mental health issues, as well as if you have any mental health issues, you need to be talking to a therapist that is objective, that's helping you sort of, pick this thing apart and coming up with a safety plan if you need to do that, coming up with the best way for you to navigate the situation. And also maybe even talking to that person about going to see someone and checking in with them about their mental health and expressing what your concerns are if you continue to want to talk to them. Which again, I would strongly urge that you take some steps back. But I recognize, again, for everyone, that that's not always feasible, but recommending that they get a mental health evaluation and consistently go see a licensed mental health professional, not a coach, but a licensed mental health professional who is trained to assess and evaluate these things, and possibly even both a therapist and a psychiatrist, because again, a veil threat is a very serious matter. And so, sometimes people, when they make these sort of threats, what tends to happen is they'll be highly emotional and highly erratic and highly impulsive with you. But then when they get in front of a mental health professional, they'll be very calm. they'll be very lucid and clear and talking like a rational person, and then they'll just be they'll be charming, and they'll make it seem like, oh, she just over he or she just overreacted, it was what it was type of thing. And so they'll sort of do what I like to call giving that mental health professional a snow job. So it's always good if you can give them, if you're around, if you can give them collateral, if you want to be in a position to do that, give them collateral, which means that you're giving them your side of things and what you're concerned about, because people do tend to turn on the charm and give a completely different story or presentation when they're in front of someone. In other words, they know how to fake it till you make it, type of thing, in a lot of cases. And that does happen quite a bit because, you know, um, this is a form of manipulation when a person says that to you. Veiled threats, violence, when people don't want others to know their propensity for violence, they can be highly manipulative and secretive about covering those things up. So I hope that this helps, and I hope that for all of you listening out there, that none of you are currently encountering this, and that you are in a place where you are receiving love. And this is this podcast today is of a cautionary and preventative tale. And so I hope that you found it helpful, and I look forward to chatting with you next time. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves, be well, and be loved.